Now, another area that we have potential on the continent this time, African economies have said to have become or could become major participants in global supply chains by harnessing their vast resources of materials needed for high technology sectors and their own growing consumer markets. And that's according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. I guess that we all know that we have potentials in Nigeria, in Africa, but how do we harness that? Has always been a question, a big question. And we know supply chains encompass the systems and resources needed to develop, produce, and transport goods and services from suppliers to customers. Now, let's find out how we can perhaps accelerate this in the face of so much need and want on the continent. Mr. Adebayo Adeleke is the founder, Supply Chain Africa. Good afternoon, Mr. Adeleke. Thank you for your time.
No, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Adeleke. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, great. So we're talking about the potential that Africa has. We know we have the raw materials. It's no longer news. We know that the West most likely feeds from us when it comes to raw materials, and yet we are not able to develop and harness those potentials. Now, there's another opportunity, supply chain, I think largely untapped. But share with us, you are overseeing supply chain in some countries on the continent. Share with us your experience of the potential and the level of development that we have at this time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Yes, African supply chain has been undervalued for quite some time now. And with the advent of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, it has brought to light of the amount of revenue and the amount of value and impact African supply chain in totality of 54 states can bring together. But I mean, since African Continental Free Trade Agreement has been launched, we've seen a lot of improvement, a lot of talks, a lot of energy towards making sure that the trade bloc within the continent is quite impactful. And I believe that a united Africa under a single trading bloc is actually, it means a lot for the world. I believe the world's going to benefit from that. And a healthy African economic landscape benefits everyone. But unfortunately, it's going to take some time because there are certain challenges that kind of hinders African supply chain. You know, when you talk about trade, if you look at trade as a train, the train tracks that the trade runs on in the supply chain, the movement of goods and services from one location to the other. And for that to happen, the whole continent there has to be a concerted effort. The whole continent has to be syncing. It's just like being in an orchestra. You know, everybody has to play their part. And unfortunately, as you can see across the Sahel, in sub-Saharan Africa, we're having some security challenges. And that in itself is going to put some pushback until we figure out how we're going to navigate through this thing. As you can see over the last few months, actually years now, we've seen what's going on in Guinea initially, and then we'll see what's going on in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and then we have Chad. But for the ECOWAS, ECOWAS, we've seen what has transpired in the last 7-8 months, and what in the last week now, the three called the Sahel Alliance has come out together, and those three countries actually contribute a lot to African GDP as a whole. So them actually from the alliance, and a lot of how African supply chain is being operated is based on geopolitics, and it's based on infrastructural run, and then ECOWAS has been together since 1975, and they've actually established, and regardless of how you think of the infrastructure, either political or economic, depending on how you look at it, either it's weak or strong, but it is an infrastructure. And for them to pull out is going to actually shock the system a bit. As the West African nations is trying to navigate how they're going to move around this, and how some of these nations are going to be getting their supply, because from Niger you have uranium, from Mali and Burkina Faso there's a large deposit of gold over there, which is quite instrumental to a lot of production globally. So, and also within Africa as well, because we cannot produce what we wanted to produce for the rest of the world. I mean, we want to be part of the value chain, but the raw materials has to be available for us to be part of the value chain. And for that to happen, every nation state has to, play its major role. And if these three guys that are actually part of it and they hold key to one of the, the minerals that we need in production are kind of bowing out, then we have to look at things differently, and that's one of the issues that is plaguing the African supply chain right now.
But Mr. Adeleke, isn't it too soon to start talking about that? Because I mean, we had these three countries with us all along. What did we do with what they have? What we saw was that the Western world were coming to exploit it and take it back to their country. I mean, I don't think we can use that as an excuse now. What have we done as a nation with what we have? How have we maximized or even explored, not even maximizing, inter-nations within us, neighboring countries? I don't think we can put it on those three countries at this time.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not unilaterally putting it on what's going on in those states, but it's part of it as well. And you're absolutely right. In single nation state haven't produced much. And because of a lot of internal issues. And for us to be able to produce as Africa, a lot of our systems and infrastructure has to talk in place. Like you can see, for example, we have, Francophone Africa, we have Anglophone Africa, and that in itself is quite problematic because our systems are quite different. The way we do business is quite different. And, our production level differs. Nigeria, for example, is supposed to hit about 3. Nigerian economy in evaluation has the potential to hit about 3 trillion, but we've not been able to actually meet our potential because of our own internal issues of security, of lack of productivity, of lack of critical infrastructure that is needed at which supply chain actually runs on. So we have a lot of work to do. Our critical infrastructure in most of these countries across Africa is lacking. Most of the pipelines, most of the what we call the integral pillars of supply chain, logistics, procurement, some of those systems and processes are lacking, and a lot of them are ancient in ways that they are not progressive in what is going on in the world. So all these things have to be, an individual state have to critically look into themselves and say, how can I be part of the global economy? And for that to happen, a lot of this has to be retooled. And these things are not cheap. It's going to take a while. But a lot of countries are actually grappling with security issues. Supply chain, infrastructure rebuild is the last on their mind. So, you have to look at Mr. Ayodeji, a boy that came before me, talking about food insecurity, which is large part of it. I mean, if people cannot eat, they cannot live. So, addressing agricultural issues and some of those food insecurity issues take priority over certain things in supply chain. So those are the things we have to kind of grapple with, especially when we talk about the whole continental supply chain at large.
All right, Mr. Adeleke, just very briefly now, what are some of the opportunities available to individuals or small businesses on the continent in this area of supply chain?
Absolutely. So as what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years with some of the data that we've gathered so far is that the world at large needs our goods. And because of our economy, because of our large human capital, we'll be able to produce that load. We have a huge labor advantage and we'll be able to produce the rest of the world. And I believe until we are getting our internal issues straight, we should be able to at least push to the rest of the world. So there is an opportunity in actually, pushing and exporting a lot of our produce. And that in itself is a great opportunity. And second of all, is the ability for, private and public partnership. The government in itself, as in Africa, we always turn to government for everything. We turn government into God. But actually, the nation building and building of supply chain infrastructures that can help us, to pull all these things together requires both the private and the public sector to come together to be able to show the knowledge, know-how, and to be able to build. So opportunities are there for infrastructural build across different nations, at least the West African, which I'm most kind of, that I know more about, So all these things it provides a huge opportunity, infrastructure build. And we've seen a lot of organizations coming together with the government to build this infrastructure, road, rail, water, and be able to, open up those pipelines to move goods and services and move agricultural products from place of abundance to place of scarcity.
All right, Mr. Adeleke, thank you so much for sharing those tips with us. We really do appreciate it. Mr. Adeboye Adeleke is the founder of Supply Chain Africa. Enjoy the rest of your day.